Okay, we will move forward into more details on the application process. So again, for eligibility, we're looking at licensed programs in the state of North Carolina that serve 0 to 5-year-olds. And this self-assessment score in the leading the way range. So we're looking at a self-assessment taken in the past year, and we're also looking for that to be their most recent self-assessment in that module. So if you got an email from me saying that a program is eligible, I was looking through GoNAPSAC self-assessment data and looking in that date range, and you should be good to go. So you don't need to really worry about this stuff. If you have a program that you know is doing all this stuff, but they haven't taken a self-assessment or they haven't taken one recently, you should feel free to, we can do that and get them eligible. And so if that's the case, again, we're just taking a self-assessment in the module that they're looking for recognition in. So that's usually a tabbed interface in GoNAPSAC. And then at the end of a self-assessment on the results page, it is actually going to show that leading the way score. So if their bar goes up into that third segment over to the right there, then they're in the leading the way score. You can also check it on the MyNAPSAC dashboard. And again, that's going to show all those self-assessments, all those recent self-assessments, and show that range. And you can always also just contact me if you're unsure, and I can also check. Okay, any questions about that? Hopefully that one was pretty straightforward. But please, if you have a question, go for it. And especially go for it because we have 2 GoNAPSAC folks on the call. So we can answer all the questions. Okay. So the next step is gathering documentation. And again, this step is gathering documentation that the program is meeting the key best practices in the module. And these key best practices we prioritize with partners around the state to really be looking at the best practices that have an impact on child health and healthy habits, that are sort of demonstrate quality and also like complement our other systems in the state, and that are hopefully feasible. And before I go any further, just know that everything I'm about to say is on the website, so you don't need to take various notes or remember it. We're also obviously recording this. But if you go to our homepage under the Get Recognized part of the navigation at the top, you can see each of the recognitions. And when you click on any one of those, so this is the PharmDAECE example, you'll see these 4 areas in which we collect documentation. And if you click on any one of those, you'll get all the details. So exactly what we're looking for, and tips and examples when we have them. We'll be continuing to add examples in there. From the module recognition pages, we also have some checklists that'll, again, just walk you through all the steps of applying. And again, I'm trying to just provide, hopefully it's not that complicated, but I'm trying to provide as much documentation as possible to help answer any possible questions, and just, again, help it be an easy and streamlined and successful process when you get to it, and just providing the information in lots of different ways depending on what works best. So for each module, we ask for about 4 pieces of documentation that align with some key best practices out of GoNAPSAC. And so what I have here is just an overview of sort of everything we're about to look at, and the sort of how it relates to the GoNAPSAC best practices for those of you who are trying to match all that up. And we're going to start with child nutrition. So the 4 pieces of child nutrition documentation, the first is a month of menus that show that the program is meeting 4 of the foods provided best practices in Go Knapsack. So whole grain rich foods 2 times per day, the deeply colored nutrient dense vegetables 3 to 4 times per week, and then limiting high fat meats and fruit juice. And I have this highlighted because I'm about to go into a whole bunch more detail on that one and an example, but I'm gonna walk you through the other pieces of documentation first. So the second piece of documentation for the child nutrition recognition is a story from a toddler preschool mealtime that shows what an authoritative feeding style looks like. And I just want to take a moment to make sure that we all are clear on authoritative feeding style, because it's a confusing term. It's also known as diplomatic or responsive feeding style. And again, the idea is to strike a balance between encouraging children to eat healthy foods and sort of respecting their autonomy and allowing them to make their own food choices. So it's looking at, how we're partly how we're creating positive meal times that we know have an impact on children's healthy eating habits. And when we ask for things like stories and descriptions, there is just a box in the application that you can type into. So that's what that will look like in the application. And I'll show you that on the application later. So the last 2 pieces of documentation is an example resource that is used for family engagement around child nutrition. And so it can be print, it can be digital, it can be in the newsletter. We're looking for something that has fact-based information and is, helping the program reinforce and connect between the things that they are, the messages and the practices they have in the program and what's happening at home. And then just a description of a conversation around these things as well. And then the last piece is written policy that addresses all of the topics in the list. So it doesn't need to go into like pages and pages of depth or even sentences and sentences of depth. We're just looking for these things to be mentioned as a way of, helping build the sustainability for these practices and also helping communicate with families. And we know that a lot of times programs are doing all the things, but they may not have it in writing. And there are great example policies available in the Go Knapsack Tips and Materials Library, as well as I know a lot of TAs have ones that they've been using with programs over time. So definitely hope that there are resources out there that you can help programs beef up or institute some of these written policies. Okay, so as I said, we're going to go back to the menu one, and we're also just going to like switch gears a little bit, give our brains a little break as we start to define what some of these best practices look like and make sure that we understand them. You're just going to take a moment to think about this dark green, orange, red, and deep yellow vegetable one. And just tell us your favorite deeply colored nutrient-rich vegetable. So you can, again, either put it in the chat or you can pop up on the mic and just, celebrate your favorite nutrient-dense vegetable.
I say spinach.
Yes.
Yes.
Cooked or fresh?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Aviva, would you mind reading the chat for me? Because I can see your face right there.
I can. Rich is voting for beets.
Wow.
And, yeah. And Ileana was talking about rainbow pizzas with children pretending to be dragons eating trees, eating spinach trees.
Love it. Yeah, spinach or broccoli is great for trees. And anytime you're pretending to be a dragon is winning.
Right.
Winning. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. So yeah, those are great examples. You know, we have we have our greens. We sort of covered those. Carrots, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, all those colorful bell peppers, beets. I cannot believe Rich went for beets. Red cabbage, tomatoes. There's lots of options here, and they don't all have to be expensive. And then again, you know, when we work the seasonal angle, we can get them in that way as well. And then the high fat meats, I wanted to make sure to help define, because the definition is a little bit different than what is in Go Knapsack. So for high fat meats, we're including sort of all of it in this category. So this is looking at you know, high fat ground beef, it's looking at processed meats, it's also looking at fried and pre-fried. So we're looking to have one time per week or less on those, or sorry, less than one time per week on those things. And the other note just being that for these menus, we are looking for basic CACFP compliance to be basically in compliance with licensing. So when we review these menus, we are looking for things like there being 2 creditable items in, you know, breakfast, things like that. So for programs that aren't on the food program, sometimes we need to, you know, just take a look and make sure that it is in compliance with those basic things. And then the licensing requirement around, you know, not having sugary foods that are, you know, on the menu. Those are only happening like on special occasions kind of thing. So we do look at those things when we review, as well as looking for these best practices. And again, we are looking for a month of menus, and we need to be able to actually see these things on the menu. So like, think about it from a reviewer's perspective. Like, if we can't see that it's there, we're gonna have to ask about it. And I'll show an example in a minute to show what some of that documentation can look like. But just know that, you know, you can write on the menu. You can also use the notes sections that we have in the application. Like, that's what they're there for. If you just feel the need to clarify anything, that's why that's there. If you don't need to use it, but it's there in case you do. And we're also looking for documentation to be from the past 12 months. So this is just an example menu that we received with an application that just sort of nicely shows what we're looking for here. So on this one, whole grains were already noted in the menu. And so we can easily count those up, because that's, you know, what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking for that 2 times a day. A lot of times with the meats, like the fact that it's lean isn't noted in the menu, but that is something that we're going to want to know. So this one, they did actually note that in the menu. And then again, we're just counting up these vegetables. So we see carrots, we see tomatoes, we see broccoli, and we can count those up. So we're just going to be looking for a menu that is, we have 4 weeks that are, you know, having the same amount of documentation and then are meeting the best practices. Okay, any questions on child nutrition documentation? And again, just you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
I have a quick question, Ellie.
Yeah.
And it's more so, I know you mentioned that the definition was slightly different for than Go Knapsack. So what is the difference as far as the high fat foods?
Yeah, so in Go Knapsack, it's in the self-assessment, a bunch of those different foods have their own item. So there's one whole, like you answer a question about the pre-fried, as opposed to it all being collapsed into one question. So it's multiple. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, Aviva do you want to, is that good enough?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. So it's not that the definition is different, it's just how it's package.
Right,
Got it.
yeah,
Right.
and it,
Yeah, that answers my question.
okay, great.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? The other place where our definitions differ a little bit for REACH is that the deeply colored vegetable best practice, we are actually accepting the answer choice as one less than that. In our initial pilot with Child Nutrition, it was just too much. We saw these menus that were, really looking pretty good, but it was just a little bit of a too much of a stretch to get 4 weeks at that everyday level. So we did take that one down a notch just for feasibility. So again, we have been trying to learn and use that information and adjust and improve. And we'll continue to do that. So if you see something that you think is a little bit out of whack, please let us know because we use that information. Okay, I'm going to move on to Farm to ECE. So again, we have 4 pieces of documentation here too. We again ask for a month of menus, and a lot of the same things apply that we need that document, like, need the notes or whatever on there to know, especially with local fruits and vegetables, because if it's not marked that it's local, we have no idea. And then we're going to come back and ask you which of the things were local. So any way that, again, you can write it on the menu before you take the picture or scan it or whatever, you can put it in the notes section in the application. But like, that's another one where like, if it's not noted somehow, it's hard for us to know. And again, we're looking at locally grown. And so this can be from the garden. And again, sometimes we really do just need to write it on the menu when it, is something that just came out of the garden a couple of days ago or that day. But so sometimes there is some confusion about, I bought it at a local grocery store, I bought it nearby, but if it wasn't grown nearby, then that's not what we're looking at in this particular for this particular recognition. Even if it's fresh and we love that and it's great, maybe we can apply for the Child Nutrition one where we're looking for those fresh vegetables. This one is really looking for those things that were locally grown, and seeing that in the growing season. And again, it can be a month of menus from the growing season that those local fruits and vegetables are being served 3 times per week or more. For gardening, up to 4 photos of the garden space that show that it produces enough to give preschoolers at least a taste, and that children actively participate in the garden. And again, this one's highlighted. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. For cooking and taste tests, we're asking for, again, a description. So similar to that story of feeding practices, as the description of a cooking or taste test activity in a preschool classroom using fresh fruits and vegetables. And again, cooking doesn't mean like things actually need to be cooked. Like this can be salsa, fruit salad, lots of those things that are, putting a pizza together, those things that are developmentally appropriate. And then again, we're asking for policy here. You'll notice that as we ask for in policy here, we're not asking for the same level of detail as in Child Nutrition. Farm to ECE is a newer thing for a lot of folks. So we're just looking for Farm to ECE to be in there in some way, that the program is communicating to families and is showing that they, want to do this, want to support local agriculture and help children learn where the food comes from. But again, this is a lot more open to interpretation, this one. So for the photos, again, a garden can be a lot of things. So it doesn't need to, be like a bed in the ground. It can be containers, raised beds, can be sort of edible landscaping. And in terms of the documentation itself, with the photos for this one, and for any time we ask for photos, which you'll see a little bit in oral health, and then especially in the physical activity outdoor plan learning areas, which we'll talk about next week. The photos are only used for review purposes, so only a few of us looking at them just to make sure that we see the best practices are being met, unless the facility gives us permission to share them, and we share them only to show these great examples of meeting best practices and these great examples of putting in successful applications similar to the ones that I'm showing today. Again, all the documentation that we're asking for is, currently in use or from the past 12 months. And as with everything, the reviewers sort of need to be able to see that these that we're meeting the best practices. And so this is an example. We see a child planting, and we see a pretty lush other box here. So this is good enough for us. Okay, questions about the Farm to ECE recognition? All right, I will move on to oral health. So again, 4 buckets here, and oral health is a little different, and again is gonna has some similarities to physical activity and outdoor plan learning, in that the application and documentation is going to differ depending on the age group served by the program. So we ask for a schedule that shows the brushing for toddlers and preschoolers, or for mixed age or family child care groups. So depending on which of those ages or groups is served, it may be 1 or 2 schedules showing brushing. And then for infants, if infants are served by the program, a photo of toothbrushing for infants. And again, photos not going to be shared unless the program gives permission to share. The second piece of documentation is related to professional development, and specifically the Brushing is Fun Start by Age 1 training that really reviews the North Carolina sanitation rules, and is also looking at effective and safe and group brushing practices. So we're looking to see in these 2 numbers up here, we're looking to see that the majority of the folks who are actually engaged in brushing have taken this training, and then we're just asking for 1 certificate. So we're not asking for a certificate for everybody, just for 1 person in the facility who has taken it. And then our last 2 pieces of documentation relate to water availability and policy again. And so again, water availability is going to be photos. So those same rules apply, that we're not going to share the photos unless we have permission. And these are 2 photos showing how the facility makes water visible and freely available throughout the day, indoors and out, for preschool children. And then the written policy, again, is going to what needs to be in there is going to be somewhat determined by the age group served, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So we are looking for brushing and the use of age appropriate or the age appropriate amount of fluoride toothpaste when families give permission. We're looking for limiting sugary drinks, limiting juice, water is freely available, and also these sippy cups and bottles, limiting during nap time and playtime. So again, same rules apply of currently in use from the past 12 months, and that we'll be looking to see that these topics are covered. And again, as I said before, we know that even if a program is doing all the things, it may not be in writing. And just again, that reminder that There are great resources for these things. So there's a toothbrush, or there's an oral health policy in Go Knapsack Tips and Materials. The Chakra Health Consultants have a great one too. And pretty much everything that I just mentioned is in there. So if someone's sort of ready to go, except for this, hopefully we can help them, get the stuff in writing, and that will be a benefit to their program. All right, questions about oral health recognition? And again, feel free to unmute. Okay, I'm going to go over the application now. And so again, the application is really there mainly as a means to upload that documentation that we just gathered of meeting the key best practices. And again, it's the application is, just as the recognition is module by module. So if Farm to ECE is what we're looking for recognition in, we're going to gather the Farm to ECE documentation and apply with the Farm to ECE application. And either a representative from the facility or from the ECE program can put in the application, or a TA consultant can put it in for them. But it's always one application per program. And just as before, there's other places where you can find the information I'm about to give and support for actually putting in the application, as well as a link to the application. So if you go to Get Recognized on our website and choose, again, the recognition of your choice, each of those pages, so the Farm to ECE recognition page, goes through all the steps of applying and has the link to apply at the bottom of the page. And then for each one, we also give a PDF version of that online application so that you can look at it beforehand and know exactly what we're going to ask about. These are not to be emailed or mailed. Just it's more for review and preparation purposes. And again, just so that we hope we make the application process really clear and as easy as it can be. So when you click on that link, you'll see an option to log in, and I think that can be confusing. The reason it's there is because that gives you the ability to save an application before you're finished and come back to it to finish it whenever you are ready. So when you want to start a new application, you put in an email address and a password, and that will get you in. And then if you have to leave that application and come back later, then you put that same email and password in the other side of the column, so the finish an existing application boxes there. So you can always use the same link, but again, your first time when you're just signing up, you're going to put that email address and password on the left side, and that's going to get you in. And then if you're coming back at a later time, you put it in on the right. And also, if you have to, if you're applying if the same facility wants to do another recognition, you can use the same email and stuff again. So don't worry about that. Not that you were, but just so you know. So the first part of the application is really all about just gathering, just knowing who you are. And so there's 3 pieces to that. So the first couple questions are really who is putting in this application, so that if we have questions, we know who to get in contact with. the second page is about the facility that's seeking recognition. So in some cases, some of these things might be the same, but in some cases they might not. And some of the information that we're collecting on this page is so to make sure that we have good contact information and websites, social media to put on the profile for when programs are recognized. So that's part of why we're collecting some of this information, is to have the correct information to put up on our website. So if a TA consultant is the one putting in the application, they have an extra couple questions on the extra page to just tell us about their organization and role. And so those are, again, you may see all of these pages or you may not, depending on who you are doing the application. The next page is just verifying eligibility and that you have permission to put this application in. And then that next page is where we collect all of that documentation that we just went through. So there's places to upload, there's those notes boxes. And again, when it's a story or a description, it's one of those boxes that you can type into. And then, as I mentioned before, we have these permissions that we ask for. So a program can give permission to share or not. And it doesn't matter to their recognition application, obviously, but just know that we ask that in there, and the real intention behind sharing is to be able to inspire other programs with all this amazing work that's going on. The last two pages of the application are optional. The next one after the uploading the documentation is just information that will go on the facilities profile on our website when they are recognized. So asking community partners that have helped, sort of the value that they see in the module they've been working on, and a photo if they want to provide that, but they don't have to, and we'll make a profile with whatever information we get. And then the last is feedback on the application and program itself. That again, we look at this and we try to improve based on it. It's not just going off into the ether and no one is ever looking at it. We do use this information, and we've made a lot of adjustments over time as we've been testing the applications to try to make them better, and we hope to continue to do that. All right, questions about the application, actually putting in an online application for the recognition? Okay, well, we're just moving on to next steps. Here we go. So if you already, I think all of you I have emailed because you have eligible programs in your county, which is great. There are 100 eligible programs right now. And again, our hope is to get as many folks as we can recognized in this first round to February 15th to just sort of get the ball rolling, build some momentum. And then to keep thinking about how we can integrate this, how we can use it to work with programs that still need to put in a little more work to meet these best practices. So if you haven't already reached out to your eligible programs, please do, or I'm happy to do it, and I can also provide verbiage or that flyer if you haven't received that. we also have another one of these information sessions for the other 3 recognitions next week, and we'll also be recording that one. So if you have programs that are eligible for one of those and want to stop by and learn more, it'll be the same kind of format and a lot of the same rules that we sort of talked through around the photos, around the policies, and how we're thinking and looking at documentation. Those are sort of general rules that apply, but there may be certain things that you're wanting to clarify. Again, our first application deadline is February 15th. We'll have another application deadline in June to again help keep getting folks in, but also, you know, for folks who are maybe still working to be eligible or meet best practices, have a deadline for them to be working towards. And then please be in touch if you have questions, suggestions, or if you have ideas for how to build value at the local level. If there are events or channels for recognition or awards that you think this fits into, I would love to support that and learn more. Also, if you are trying to think through how to fit it into how you're implementing Go Knapsack or your other healthy habits work, we're really interested in that so that we can again make sure that we're providing the kinds of things that are going to be helpful for you. In my conversations with TAs so far, folks have talked about a little bit more around teacher recognition, also looking at specific best practices and looking at, you know, that incremental gains of maybe we haven't met all of these key best practices, but we just met this one. Can we celebrate that? So these are the kinds of things that we're going to continue to talk about and see how we can support, along with sort of more family engagement kind of stuff. So with that in mind, as you're thinking about implementation, we do have print copies of some of the documents that are sort of squished in here at the bottom. So if any of that would help with your implementation or you think would add to the award for your local programs, we're happy to pass those along. So just let me know if any of those are of interest and we can get them to you. And yeah, just be in touch if you need anything through the email that you have already gotten at least a couple messages from me or through our website. So any questions or any suggestions that you want to share here as we're finishing up? All right, hopefully you got the information that you needed or wanted, and that you feel ready to move forward. And as always, I am available if you need anything, and please do let us know how we can support your work, because that's what we're here for. So thanks again for being here, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks for being here.
Anything else that's helpful for you?
I mean, hopefully that all
I'm gonna
made
stop
sense.
recording.
Yeah.